Do you believe
No,
do you believe in punishment for abortion? Yes or no, as a principle?
The answer is that there has to be some form of punishment.
For the woman?
Yeah, there has to be some form.
10 cents, 10 years.
I don't know. That I don't know. That
Why
I don't
not?
know.
Welcome to Opinion Journal. I'm Mary Kissel. Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump quickly walked back those comments on punishing abortion. What are the implications for him as a candidate and for the race moving forward? Ethics and Public Policy Center senior fellow Mona Charen, she's a former White House speechwriter, joins the show. Mona, we've got an editorial out this morning. It's titled Trump's Abortion Gaffe. Was this a fair question to ask of him?
Look, Donald Trump's entire campaign has been based on the notion that the normal preparation that other candidates have to do, getting up to speed on issues, familiarizing themselves with the nuances of national matters, doesn't apply to him. And until now, until quite recently, he seems to have gotten away with it. And now he's beginning to trip over these kinds of complicated questions. They said Romney spoke conservatism as a second language. For Trump, it would be a fifth or a sixth. And so he has no idea about how you're supposed to talk about abortion, that even people who consider themselves pro-life have never taken the view that you should punish women for having abortions. He just stumbled into it because he's ignorant and he will not educate himself.
Now, the most recent poll out of Wisconsin shows Ted Cruz with a pretty wide lead here, almost 40% to Donald Trump's 30%. Mona, this was a poll that was taken even before these comments on abortion, before the flap with the campaign manager really got heated. Why is Cruz leading there, and could that lead widen?
Well, I think Wisconsin could be a really interesting turning point here, because what you're seeing is, it's strange because Ted Cruz really ran as the anti-establishment candidate, and then his thunder was stolen by Cruz. But now what you see is Cruz ran as the anti-establishment candidate, had his thunder stolen by Trump. Now Cruz is pivoting to become the choice of the establishment. And in Wisconsin, the Republican establishment is tremendously strong. Scott Walker has a fantastic organization. Their voter turnout in Wisconsin is the second highest in the country. And they have lined up behind Cruz in a Stop Trump movement. And they also have the help in Wisconsin of local talk radio, which, unlike national talk radio, which has been very pro-Trump, the talk radio people in Wisconsin, the conservative ones, have been very anti-Trump. So,
well, they've also been diving into the policy implications of what a Trump candidacy would mean for our economy, for our foreign policy.
Which is what a good anti-Trump person should do, right? I mean, it has to be about policy and character.
Well, Mona, I wish we had more time. Of course, we've got the northeastern states coming up, but we're going to have to dive into that analysis on a later segment. Ethics and Public Policy Center senior fellow Mona Charen, thanks for joining the show.
Pleasure.
More to come. Stay tuned. What's the state of the race on the Democratic side of politics? University of Virginia Center for Politics Director Larry Sabato joins the show. Larry, it's great to have you back on the program. I want to start with Wisconsin and recent polling out of there that shows Bernie Sanders winning the state pretty handily, at least according to this poll. It's out of the Marquette Law School. Why is he doing so well in the state?
Well, he's been expected all along to carry Wisconsin. It should be one of his best primary states. As we all know, Bernie does much better in caucuses than he does in primaries. And as a result of that, a 4-point victory for him in any primary state is probably a good result. He's not leading by much. I was surprised, frankly, that the Marquette University poll had this at 49-45, I believe, with Sanders over Clinton. It doesn't matter much. He's not going to be the nominee. And
well, hang on a sec, Larry. I want to just challenge you a little bit there, because Bernie Sanders has almost none of the so-called superdelegates, the Democratic elites who are all lining up behind Hillary Clinton. That's been a huge boost for Hillary, but isn't Bernie gaining momentum?
Not really. If you look even at just the pledged delegates, he's nowhere near Clinton. And here's the key. You have to remember that on the Democratic side, everything is proportional representation, Mary. It's not like the Republican side where if you have a really good night and you win big, you can make up a lot of delegates all at once. It's almost impossible to do that.
So let's turn to New York, Hillary Clinton's home state. We've got the recent poll of Quinnipiac, likely Democratic primary voters, showing Hillary with a very big lead there. Yet Bernie has been raising a lot of money. Larry, which voters exactly is Bernie aiming for? Is he going to go into New York City, or is he going to try to go upstate?
He does well wherever the Democratic constituency is, frankly, overwhelmingly white. Some of the upstate constituencies may be more open to his message, surprisingly, than the more left-wing congressional districts in and around New York City. Look, he should do reasonably well in New York. She's going to win New York. Again, I just say, even if she wins at 55-45 or even gets to 60-40, she isn't going to get that many additional delegates because of proportional representation. Once this thing gets on a track on the Democratic side, it's very difficult to get the train off the track.
You have your own so-called crystal ball where you looked very prematurely, but a fascinating piece on the general election, the down market races. It looks like the map is changing very heavily in favor of the Democrats when it comes to November. Why?
Well, it hasn't changed that much, Mary. This has been true for some time, that Donald Trump has been well behind Hillary Clinton in the polling averages. And frankly, Ted Cruz has as well, the other alternative, or the likely alternative. The difference being that Cruz is only behind about 3, 4, 5 points in the polling averages, whereas Trump is behind Clinton by 10 or 11 points. So that's a big difference. Cruz has plenty of ground to make up, but in Trump's case, he will have to really turn things around. It's difficult to see how he could do it, but then there are 7 months to go.
Well, we talked yesterday with Tim Phillips about some of the gubernatorial races and how they might be affected, especially the reform-minded governors. It's not a good story. Larry Sabato at the University of Virginia, thanks for joining the show.
Thank you, Mary.
More Opinion Journal to come. Stay tuned. Ever wonder why the U.S. economy is growing at 2% in the Obama era? Well, you might want to have a look at the layers of red tape the administration is putting on businesses. Employment Policies Institute Director Mike Saltzman joins us in studio for a change. Mike, great to have you on the program. I talked to Doug Holtz-Eakin yesterday about California's $15 minimum wage. We had an editorial up on that on WSJ.com. But there's more going on. What are you looking at specifically when it comes to burdens on employers?
So there's been a real moving of the goalposts, and I think unions have decided that they don't want to just dictate how much you can pay your employees, but now they're interested in dictating when they can work, how you can schedule them. And so in San Francisco, you had a law that was passed that actually forces employers to pay employees if they're scheduled, and then you change their schedules before they come on.
Oh, come on, Mike, that has to be a joke.
I wish it was. You know, if you're an ice cream store this summer facing a rainy day, and you only have a couple of customers in the store, if you have to cancel those employees' schedules, you still have to pay them for up to 4 hours of their shift.
So what would be the natural reaction of employers to diktats like that? And by the way, let's put the op-ed up on the screen, because I know you had an op-ed up on WSJ.com.
So the natural reaction is to offer employees less flexibility or to hire fewer part-timers. And in San Francisco, we've got a new study out that shows that's exactly what's happening. Now, unions don't mind this because they want to encourage full-time work, because if you're a full-time employee, you may be more likely to think union. It also levels the playing field for other unionized grocery stores who have been dealing with this kind of nonsense for years.
Now, this isn't the only attempt by the administration to dictate the minutia of the workplace. How about the Department of Labor? What are they up to?
So the Department of Labor has a number of harmful rules that they've been working on. You know, the overtime rule is one that a lot of people have been talking about, where they've raised the threshold at which you have to pay overtime. So if you're a manager now, I mean, it's pretty clear what's going to happen. You're either going to see your wages lowered, so if you're working overtime, your total compensation remains the same, or you're just going to work fewer hours. And that's not really the American way. People want to be able to work more hours to strive and work their way up the ladder. Instead, we have less opportunity to do that.
Well, there's also something called the persuader rule, but unfortunately, we are out of time. We'll have to talk about that on the next depressing segment about red tape. Employment Policies Institute Director Mike Saltzman, thanks very much.
Thanks.
One of Britain's biggest steelmakers says it is pulling out of that economy. What's going on, and is it another big blow to David Cameron's Tory government? Europe editorial page editor Joe Sternberg joins us from London. Joe, great to have you on the program. Tata, very, very big steelmaker. Why is it trying to sell its business in the UK?
Well, you have two factors going on here. One is a global factor, China. Certainly China over the past few years has really ramped up steel production, and as the economy there is slowing, they're discovering they're consuming less of what they're producing. More of it is hitting the global market, and steel prices globally have really fallen. And then you have that intersecting with factors that make it so expensive to produce steel here in the UK. Particularly environmental regulation over the past few years under Prime Minister David Cameron and his Conservative Party has really increased electricity prices for a lot of heavy industries, and what we're seeing now are the consequences of those policies. Britain is first in line when a global company like India's Tata needs to figure out where to cut capacity.
Well, hang on, Joe. I thought the Tory governments, I'm thinking of Margaret Thatcher, that they would be for lower taxes, for more investment, for fewer burdens on business. So isn't David Cameron a Tory? What is he doing?
Well, unfortunately, we're further and further away from Margaret Thatcher's legacy over here, and I think that certainly David Cameron and his Chancellor George Osborne have been very successful in some regards, cutting corporate taxes, which will now be coming down to 17% over the next few years from 28% 5 years ago. Some elements of deregulation, but then you also have this mix of Tory modernization, which tries to co-opt the left on things like environmental policies, and what you end up with are benefits for some businesses. Certainly I think the economy is a lot healthier because of some of the tax cuts, but then it's still very difficult if you're in unfavored industries like steel manufacturing when you have all of these green industrial policies going on. So really they need more of the Margaret Thatcher style tax cutting and less of this Tory modernizing attempt to co-opt the left-wing Labour Party with some of these green policies.
Well, here, we've got an editorial up called The Real Tory Trouble. It's on WSJ.com for all of our subscribers if you want to learn more about the budget. Very quickly, Joe, I know there's been a lot of internal discord in David Cameron's cabinet. Is that fatal, or do you think that he'll be able to rally the troops?
Well, I think that they'll end up uniting because the biggest immediate source of discord is this debate about whether Britain should stay in the European Union or leave. I mean, that referendum happens in June, and then after that they have 4 years to get their act together before the next election. I think their bigger problem are things like these economic policies, which continue to encourage a sense of unease among ordinary working people here in Britain, who might understand that in general the economy is growing pretty healthily, but wonder, is their industry going to benefit from that?
Well, we will leave it at that. If you want to follow Joe's work, you can follow him up on Twitter at Joseph Sternberg. Out of London, Joe, thanks for joining the show.